Hey, Cheryl. Yeah, you can stay.
Should I come on or?
You're on.
Oh,
So yeah. So this is Cheryl Slane, who is our special guest moderator tonight, and also um, our co-organizer of the festival this week. I just want to do a quick introduction of you before I hand it over. Um, Cheryl's a playwright herself, filmmaker, and climate activist with a diverse academic background in physics, literature, and sustainability. She's taught creative writing and filmmaking at several universities and started a video production company specializing in narrative strategies for educational media. And she co-founded the grassroots collective Vision LA Climate Action Arts to produce a multidisciplinary arts festival concurrent with the UN Paris Accords. And she, relevant to this, she currently works with NRDC as the creative director of Rewrite the Future, which I mentioned before, climate storytelling in entertainment initiative. So thank you, Cheryl, for moderating tonight. You can welcome our guests, and I will go.
thank you, Ian. Thank you so much. And thanks to the new group for presenting this collection of terrific new plays that creatively engage with the climate crisis issue and environmental racism. It's really inspiring to see this new work taking on these issues. And as Ian said, I'm creative director of NRDC's Rewrite the Future initiative, which encourages more and varied climate stories and entertainment to help inspire us to choose a better future and solve this crisis. For our post-play discussion, I'm pleased to welcome back some of the creative team from the play, the reading you just saw, plus a prominent climate activist. And we're going to have a chat about the play and its themes. So I'll just introduce them with shortened versions of their bios a little bit here. So first of all, Ray Binstock, who is the playwright of this beautiful work, is a Dramatists Guild Fellow, a Rita Goldberg Playwrights Workshop Fellow at the Lark, Emerging Artist Fellow in Dramatic Writing at the Lighthouse Writers Workshop, and a 2019 Artist Fellow in Playwriting and Screenwriting from the New York Foundation for the Arts, among many other accolades. Congratulations on a terrific play, Ray.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. And Kareem Fahmy, the multi-talented director of the reading. He has directed a number of world premiere productions and is also a playwright whose work has been developed at many theaters in New York and nationally, really too many to name. He is the co-founder of the Middle Eastern American Writers Lab at the Lark and a co-founder of Maya Directors, a consulting group for organizations and artists engaging with stories from the Middle East and beyond. Welcome, Kareem. Are you here?
I'm here.
Oh, there he is. There he is. Fantastic work. Welcome.
Thank you.
Barzin Akavan, who played Ali and the bailiff in these readings, recently was heard in Richard II, produced by the Public and WNYC, and is also a veteran of many New York and regional productions, including at CSC, Guthrie, Berkeley Rep, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and many more. Thanks for joining us, Barzin.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Here he is. And Andrea Abello. Is that right, Andrea? Abello, who played Rosa and One, is a Colombian-American actor, a poet, and teaching artist with many off-Broadway and regional credits, including at Soho Rep, Signature Theater, St. Louis Rep, Actors Theater of Louisville, and many more. Hello, Andrea. Hey. Nice work, nice work. And finally, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Anna Jane Joyner. who is a communication strategist and passionate about crafting stories and strategies that inspire new and non-traditional audiences to take action on climate change. Her efforts to engage evangelicals was featured in Years of Living Dangerously, an Emmy Award-winning Showtime docuseries. She's also the host of No Place Like Home, a podcast that gets to the heart of climate change. And she's the founder of the Good Energy Project, a new initiative to support writers and producers in integrating climate stories into TV and film. Thank you for joining us, Anna Jane.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all for your terrific work in this reading tonight. It was really, really engaging and inspiring. I enjoyed it so much. And thanks for joining us on the chat. I'm sort of hoping that this will be more of like an open, sort of freewheeling discussion rather than a straight Q&A. So please feel free to jump in and respond to anything. You don't need to wait, for a question directly to you or whatever to share. And for our friends out there watching on YouTube, we welcome your questions too. Please post them in the comment section at any time and they'll make their way over to us. Okay, so I will start with a question for Ray. First, I'd love to know what inspired you to write about the climate crisis through the lens of faith and religion. You talked about it a teeny bit at the top, but I'd love to hear more about that. And also why you chose to approach it through this form of 5 diverse short plays that have different perspectives.
Yeah, I have always been fascinated by religion, not just the concept of theology and religious ritual or belief, but the stories that make up religion, from ancient Greek myths and Norse gods and Egyptian gods to the fact that the Abrahamic religions are 3 incredibly distinct and different religious set of religious beliefs, and yet they all share a common root, and they all reiterate a lot of the same themes and stories in slightly different versions. I think I initially was kind of looking for a way to, as I said earlier, draw that parallel between nature as this force that humanity is really defined throughout our history by our struggle against nature, our struggle to overcome it, our struggle to control it, our struggle to protect ourselves from natural disasters, to survive and feed ourselves within the system of nature. And it's only in the last 100 years or so that we've really understood that nature is not so powerful that it's not so powerful that all we can do is hope to protect ourselves against it. We've won. We won, and we've affected nature. We've, quote unquote, broken it. And I think part of why some people have such a problem really perceiving climate change as what it is, which is a paradigm shift, is because it just goes against the foundation of human society, which is nature as the implacable force to be reckoned with always, not something that we could ever be greater than. And I think that everything I just said goes for God, especially God is conceived in the Abrahamic paradigm. And it really, there's, and I specifically came to it from a Jewish perspective. I was not raised with any real Jewish education. My family is very culturally Jewish. There's a lot of that, but I really came to the understanding of the religion itself on my own. And, the God of the Old Testament, the Jewish God, has a very natural disaster, natural bounty kind of feel to him. He's not controllable, but he is understandable. He's human and inhuman. So all that to say that it really was that kind of juxtaposition between these 2 omnipresent forces and how we balance our respect and fear of them and now in the context of climate change. And then the 5 distinct stories is really about like all Abrahamic religions are stories. I mean, that's a huge generalization, but the stories in the New and Old Testament, in the Quran, and in all of the surrounding literature, they make up these personalities that are the core of Abrahamic religion. And a lot of them are shared. Noah and the Ark appear in all 3. In the religious literature of all 3. So does the Exodus. Abraham is this key figure, and I think I was more interested, rather than trying to reconcile all 3 of them together into one story about climate change and kind of be using religion as a cipher for it. I wanted to get in there on a more granular level and not just use blanket cosmology and generalizations for one story, but interact with the specific stories that I think are have more to say on their own than, in one kind of big mishmash.
Yeah, it's definitely an ambitious, but fruitful approach, I think. I mean, writing 5 plays is a big task. So I wanted to just ask you, Anna Jane, kind of to respond to what Ray just offered, but kind of within the context of your experience working with faith communities and how they are relating to the climate crisis, and through their faith, through their religious stories, and so on, and if how that is for you to work with as an activist and trying to get them engaged.
Yeah, I can completely relate to a lot of what Ray just said. I was raised evangelical. My dad's an evangelical megachurch pastor. I am no longer evangelical, but it definitely informed a lot of my thinking. And I was kind of early on in college when I first started getting into climate activism, really drawn to the communication side, because it was very much about the stories and the narratives and the frameworks that we use to try to inspire people to care and to do something about these things. It's also was just a really big gap in the climate movement, till this day, but especially back then. And I kind of quickly got roped into a lot of different jobs that were engaging people of faith, including evangelicals, but other traditions as well. And because I had that background, I had that insight and understanding. And I really loved it. And I thought it's very strategically powerful, for sure, and important to engage those communities. But what I've come to learn kind of as I've gotten older and moved more in kind of a creative direction and a storytelling direction, that one of the things that really made that work so interesting to me is that they were stories. You had this kind of concrete set of stories that you could use to talk to people and to influence them and to inspire them. So I loved that insight. I do think that at the root, all religions, certainly the Abrahamic faiths, are stories, are a collection of stories that have deeply impacted our society and our behaviors and our values and our politics, and definitely around climate change, for better and for very bad. But yeah, I'm really excited to be exploring kind of storytelling and climate from that lens, because I think they're very connected.
And just an extension of that is, at the root of stories themselves are characters. And I think that, in Christianity, the character, quote unquote, of Jesus is this very, people, he appears in different stories, people identify with him, they identify against him, it's the same can be said for Moses, who's a really big, quote unquote, character. Like, all of these stories have people in them, and we identify with those people, or we are inspired by those people, or we disagree with those people. And I think that kind of unfortunately, that a lot of the ways in which we've come at, like, society has kind of bent towards identifying with and being inspired by these people are in ways that encourage us away from action over climate change and from unity in facing climate change, which is a tragedy, because so many of these characters in religious writings are, they're radicals who take great strides in order to preserve and protect, to not only to preserve and protect their people, but to end a harmful status quo,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'll jump in really quickly, and then I'd love to invite other people to weigh in. But yeah, I do think that you're absolutely right, that it's so hypocritical to a lot of these characters and these stories, the way that they've been used. Like I think it was Wendell Berry, who's an author and poet. He said like the Bible is a fiddle that you can play a lot of songs on, like you can twist it, and that's true for all the Abrahamic faiths for sure, because they are so complex and there are lots of different stories. And yeah, and then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that I think that's true for storytelling in general. Like the way that we connect to these issues, including climate change, is through characters. And that can be applied across the board to plays, to TV. Oftentimes I think we think of climate change outside of the characters as like this exterior force, but I'm really far more interested in thinking about like how would the character that I'm creating respond to climate within the world that I'm creating. And I think there's so many more interesting storytelling ends when you think about it through the lens of characters.
Yes, and I'd agree with that and say that it's probably the only way in. I mean, stories are about people, not about issues. So if you want to, address an issue in your play or film or whatever, you have to start with the characters, and Ray did that wonderfully. There's some really great characters in here. So I wanted to invite the actors and our director here forward for a second and ask you guys, was there something in the plays and in your creation of the character that was, on the page, making that come to life, that really intrigued you or inspired you or challenged you as an artist approaching the material? Something that was really, big for you as you were approaching this, something that stuck with you, helped inform your character, or that you liked a lot? Your favorite part?
Playing God was fun. And there's a cool through line. I mean, I'm sure it's on purpose because Ray's very smart, and intentional, that like the person cast as Rosa and Juan. I love the moment in the court scene where she like scoffs at him and is like, well, first of all, God is not a man. And second of all, whatever she says in that moment. And then I think it's cool that the gender dynamic between 1 and 2 in the hereafter. As somebody was raised atheist and now I'm probably agnostic. My mom is Jewish and we're raised culturally Jewish. And my joke is always like, we're Jewish. It's like the running joke. But whenever somebody asks me if I believe in something, my response is like, I'm not sure, but I know if there's a God, it's a woman. So like from a personal approach, being able to play that was super fun. And I think the way that last scene, the hereafter, is structured is really juicy, because we talked about the devil and God being exes. And so we tried to approach it, like you were saying, I knew it was like gonna be a huge trap to approach that, like, I'm playing God, I'm playing this giant thing that people believe in. And Kareem also encouraged me to come at it very easy and colloquial and nonchalant, and that's in the writing. And I think that you're able to tackle those really juicy things. And there's some texts that right now with what we're dealing with really struck me, you know, about not seeing people's faces and look what humans have done to destroy the earth, and like, you know, being through a screen in the middle of this pandemic and saying those words that are talking about a different version of the world, but it's very directly applicable. Playing it super easy, I think, tackles some really big world issues versus like being like, this scene is about God and humanity, which I think you were kind of getting at, Cheryl. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
I just became familiar with the play a few days ago, and so we've only been able to sit with it for a couple of days, and I've become a huge Ray Binstock fan, as I've told her, because I honestly think that the play is incredibly layered. And I just was thinking to myself, I'm a big theater nut myself, and I'm ashamed to say I don't know of any climate action plays or dramatic work. You know, I was trying to think of the things that popped in my head, and I asked my wife, is K2 like a climate change? I couldn't even remember now, going back on it. The other one that had popped up to me was John Patrick Shanley a few years ago. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's a parable about the like Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and he uses Oregon loggers, I think, in the kind of debate on it. And then earlier this year, I saw a production, or friends of mine, called Terra Firma by Barbara Hammond, produced by the Coop. And it has kind of an element of, it's not purely about climate change, but I just thought, what a rich mind, God, to use that terminology, but to mine, this is really great material that we have that we could be using. And I'm surprised that it's not on our stages more, or these conversations aren't more. So I want to applaud Ray for opening me up to a whole new genre of work, because I just think it's really amazing. I really do. I don't want to.
You're making me reflect on, you know, stories about climate change, and touching on this idea of how when we approach it not as an issue but as a character-based story, I just when you're talking about like it plays about climate change, there are very few that come to mind, but one moment of one play that looms so large in my memory, and that in fact has actually, in a sense, changed my approach, is that this is many years ago. I don't know if any of you happen to see it, but there's a play who I think is written by Nick Payne, I think, called If There Is, I Haven't Found It Yet. It was at Roundabout like many years ago, but it's really a play about a man who has distanced himself and alienated himself from his family because he's become so obsessed with being a climate activist. And it's a really interesting, flawed play, but a really, really interesting play. But there's a moment in the play where I believe it's his son or his daughter, his child wants to eat pineapple, and in the family, it's a British play. It's set in the UK, and the father yells and admonishes him, and they get into this fight because he talks about the carbon footprint of pineapple and how, you know, pineapple is grown in Hawaii, and the amount of carbon it takes to get this pineapple from, you know, Hawaii or whatever island is grown on to London, where his child wants to eat it. Because it's pineapple and it's delicious and it's sweet. And now it's like every time I eat a pineapple, my husband always laughs at me. And I was like, we can't buy a pineapple because the carbon footprint of pineapple is too bad. But because it was rooted in this character-based moment that was really stunning, because it was like a father yelling at his child for wanting to have pineapple. But it really made me think about, you know, this thing that I wouldn't normally think about. It's like, what is the carbon footprint of the foods that I eat? You know, and then of course you can spin out from there and think about the carbon footprint of every single thing you do, the products you buy, the trips you take, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when it's reduced to that human level in the way that we do as theater artists, I think it does make something that is to too many people still just like an issue, actually very, very personal. Mm-hmm. And I think that what this play does in a really interesting way is like, it's personal, but then it also becomes mythic, you know, and we actually start to think about all the stuff you were touching on earlier is so beautiful, because the mythic is the heart of how theater started with the Greeks, right? Like us grappling with these larger than life issues, like literally talking to God and saying like, I don't know how to make sense of this. And in this play, you actually humanize those characters. And I think that's what makes it such a fascinating and very unique play, that it is mythic and human, and yes, about an issue as well. So I think I applaud you, Ray, for the complexity of your thinking.
Very much so. It's like she had said earlier to us, and kind of in the that Ali's character kind of says that God chooses these everyday normal people with these messages to say, and charges them, and says that no matter what, you have to make this message clear and make this message known and heard. And it's almost in that way of galvanizing or commissioning, if you will, an artist, and saying, I'm putting these words into your head right now, Ray. Write them out for the world to hear and see. And it's incredible. It's beautiful.
I have a question about your creative process, Ray. I think one thing that you touched on earlier, Barzin, was just the lack of climate content in narrative in general, plays, TV, film, across the board. I think the only Broadway play I know that has touched on climate is Hadestown, where there was some climate and underpinning. I'm not as familiar with the kind of broader playwright community, but at least within TV and film, it's something like 1% of shows and movies touch on climate at all, let alone have more substantive storylines or characters.
Not even climate, environmental, and 1% environmental. Climate is some subset of that.
Yeah, so even less, which obviously me and Cheryl are working very hard to change. But I am curious, Ray, I think a lot of writers feel very intimidated by this issue, and they also feel like it could just be boring because of how complex and scientific and technical a lot of the more media-driven narrative around it is, and the narratives from green groups themselves, from environmental organizations. So I'm curious both what inspired you to tackle it when so few other writers do, and then also like what the process for you was to try to take it from this big kind of scary thing that's exterior to really integrating it into your characters and those worlds in a way that feels really authentic.
Yeah, I mean, I had that thought. I've had that thought, and I've had that conversation a lot with Ian Morgan and with Charlie Gershman, who is one of the other playwrights in this series, who I was talking about this too a while ago. I think that people who write for performance, and that includes everyone from stage to TV and film, there is something very rough about writing about climate change, because there is no ambiguity about how bad it is and about the ending. You know, human stories, like even the worst tragedies like Oedipus, which is, you know, a very basic theatrical tragedy. There's this idea that the horrible thing has happened, but like eventually even this one person whose life has been ruined and the people around him, he will move on, and like the city of Thebes is still standing. You know, there's always a sense in Long Day's Journey into Night, you know, where it's just all of these broken characters who are sitting around kind of obliquely discussing their brokenness. You still find moments of connection and happiness and love in these tragedies. But the thing about climate change is there's no way around it being what it is, which is like something that we've caused, something that we're not fixing and addressing, and something that will cause untold grief. And I think that writers shy away from subjects like that because with no ambiguity, you have no room for artistry. You know, it's really hard to emotionally engage people in something that feels essentially like a dead end of awful truth, you know? It's very, George Bernard Shaw can do it. Because George Bernard Shaw could rant about like the size, about the difference in shoe sizes between the UK and the US for 400 pages if you gave him a chance. But I think that a lot of playwrights, like, it's just not, it is railing against the gods, but but the gods can't talk back and there is no hero. It's Greek theater, but without the deus ex machina, without any sense that anyone's listening. It's just kind of a combination of frustrating and pathetic to approach. And I think people don't want to write about it because they would rather write about problems that can have either solutions or can have ambiguity so that they, but I decided I wanted to write about it because I just think that that it is so real, that to not write about it is to just make it worse in its own way. It's to make it more strong. It's to make it stronger and more powerful. And I think that kind of what Kareem was saying about the human moment, exemplifying a larger concept, is that it would be really easy to write a screed against climate change. It'd be really easy to write a version of The Normal Heart that is about climate change, because that's a screed about how terrible something is and how wrong it is. And it's effective. It's an open wound that is just like pouring out this pain, and it is effective. But with climate change, I think that there is just so many, although it is unambiguous, it is complex and it is multifaceted. And to explore that, I wanted to do something that basically I wanted to inject ambiguity into it through the human element of experiencing climate change, because the fact of climate change is unambiguous, but what people feel about it, the anxiety that it gives all of us, the sense of responsibility and impending doom, even as we kind of continue to live our lives, is very human. And there's a lot of ambiguity there. And religion is, for better or worse, is a source of a lot of ambiguity for people. I mean, I was raised the opposite of evangelical. I was raised with very, very little religious education. And I was always a little bit in awe of people who had religion as a source of structure in their lives and a belief system. It's a belief system that allows you, as you very well know, it gives you a guide for how to approach something as scary and unambiguously awful as climate change. And
yeah, so can I jump in here for a second?
Please.
I want to just drop in something. It's a question. It actually is one of the things that I took away from your the plays, which was this sense that there was an inevitability to these horrible futures that people were either having to deal with, or we saw them in the midst of experiencing them. The sort of slow motion apocalypse, as they call climate change sometimes. And you also mentioned earlier that it was the way that religion kind of or religious stories sort of cut off human agency in a way that I felt like those things might be related. I was wondering about that, because from my point of view, the future is not written in stone. I mean, there's a bunch of different trajectories we could go from this point. So the inevitability, we're in it now. I mean, we are definitely in it now. The science can't be denied, and yet we could partially solve this, or at least continue to, if we really rose to the challenge.
I mean,
Cheryl, let me ask I'm going to pop this one. I love what you just said right there. But in the argument against it, I would say waiting for Godot. Beckett does, again, Ray, look at that. I'm comparing you to Beckett right now. he makes no aversions about things are going to end up well, things are going to end up good, or things can end up happy out of it. I think it's in all he says is this is inevitable. Now, again, that's a line of thinking. His is a nihilistic.
That's the Beckett view.
Yes,
It's really fatalistic. Really,
so, I mean, that's I think that's the twist of the writer of saying, you know, or the I don't know what the vigilance of the writer of saying if they want to activate something within us. But Beckett was just writing for the time of living in the possibility of nuclear holocaust and saying, this is what it is. And this is what could be.
Yes.
Could this play be saying the same thing?
Is this a warning? Is this a warning? Are these plays a warning to us? That's kind of
I think every one of those plays ends on a weirdly, like ends on an optimistic note, weirdly. Like even the one that ends with the entire world underwater and only one person and Gecko still alive, like she's not in a bad mood. Like she's surviving, you know. I think every single one of them, there is a sense, it doesn't end with like, and now, you know, let's like slowly set the world on fire and just sit in the ashes. Like I am a very hopeful person. And I think that it is important. I think that it's important not to kind of be like, not to sugarcoat and not to say that, like you said, the science is there. Like we have to be honest about what, not only with what's happening, but what we've done. Like we have had so many chances we have so much information. We've had so many chances to stop, to change, and we haven't. And we have to reckon with that. But like you said, who knows what could happen? Tomorrow they could come up with a technology that we can't imagine right now, but could be a game changer in this. You know, tomorrow, like who saw coronavirus and its effect on the economy and technology and society coming? There is no written in stone. That's not how the future works. It's not written in anything. But then also, you know, I think that I think that often people trying to write about climate change feels like that dead end. It feels like that wall, because all you can do is focus on the negative. And it's always really important to me not to do that.
Yes, yes. I wanted to invite Anna Jane. I know you have a lot to say about this particular topic, please.
Yeah, no, I totally hear where you're coming from. And I do think that especially, I mean, the mainstream media and most of the news and even the report that came out today on climate change is terrifying. So it's really easy to just feel super overwhelmed and depressed about it. But a couple of thoughts that I just wanted to add. One is, I think like another example, in addition to Waiting for Godot, is Chernobyl, which was like this, you know, which was actually Craig Mazin created as a climate change metaphor explicitly to try to get more people to care about climate. And obviously we know how that story ends up and it's horrible. You know, it's absolutely absolutely tragic. But still, it was one of the best TV shows of last year that won all these Emmys, and the characters were fascinating, and we were drawn into it because of the characters, even though we knew where they were headed. And so I just want, and I think you did that really beautiful in a lot of your plays today. So I do think that even though we know climate is super scary, there's still, and even just like from my personal perspective, having worked on climate for like almost 15 years now, which ages me, I know. You know, it is depressing and sad, and I get overwhelmed, and, you know, like there's a lot of, it's really hard to face the potential end of the world for your job all the time. But there's also an incredible amount of joy and beauty and amazing, hilarious, flawed human characters who are part of this work. And I think there's a lot to mine even within the sadness and scariness of it. Like there is, you know, we're still humans. We still have to find joy and beauty and humor and connection. And so I do think there's a lot of stories there that maybe aren't as apparent to people outside of the climate movement who aren't intersecting with all these, you know, people on the front lines or fellow activists or scientists. But I just have moments all the time where I'm like, man, somebody should write a TV show about you. Like, you have a crazy life, you know? And so, but yeah, so that's one thought. And then the other thing I just wanted to add to that is I do feel like I get all the hesitations around writing about climate, and I'm so grateful and impressed that you did, and you did it in such a beautiful, compelling, you know, funny in a lot of ways way. But I also feel like at this point, it's almost strange that our popular culture, our plays and our TV shows and our movies, at least if they're set in this modern era or in the near future, like I feel like there's a weird disconnect, you know, like if you don't talk about it, it's not reflecting the lives that we're experiencing, because really anyone alive in this world right now or in the next 100 years is in some way wrestling and grappling with climate change, and we're just not seeing that in the shows and stories that we love.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just really quickly to say that
Sure.
I think that's always a tension in the creation of art, is like, you know, it's kind of the difference between art, entertainment, and discussion, you know, is that you can combine a lot of them, but especially when things are bad, or when there's a lot of things that are frightening, people really, there's a call for entertainment that doesn't go into that, no matter how relevant it is. And I think that something really important that writers can do is to find a way to write about climate change that doesn't deny that it exists, but also doesn't portray it as an automatic doomsday button for all of human society, because it's not. The thing I say a lot is that there's no such thing as the end of the world, because nothing ends. You know, like, short of literally like every atomic bomb going off at once and the world being covered in radioactive ash for however long the half-life is, and then something will evolve out of that, like life won't be done. But we are going, no matter what happens, people, you don't get to wake up one day and someone says to you, like, that's it, you're done, like you can leave, and you step off of the planet and go, you know, to another world. This is what we have. And I think that there's something scary about that, but there's also something really exhilarating about the idea that, like, every day that you realize the gravity of being a person and the responsibility that you have is a day that you can choose to do something. You know, there's an opposite side of optimism and hope and action to this automatic kind of, like, you know.
Yes, with great crisis comes great opportunity for paradigmatic change, because we have to, right? If we're going to survive. So it's very interesting to wonder what those stories are. The story of the drama of the great paradigmatic change. And it must begin, I think, with facing the truth, which is what I think your plays are doing, warning us about where we're heading through this lens of faith. And unfortunately, that was such an interesting conversation. It went by so fast, but we're at the end of our time. But I wanted to take a moment to invite anyone else to, we haven't heard from the actors or Kareem much, and wanted to invite you to share any other thoughts you might have.
I just want to commend the actors for their wonderful generosity of spirit approaching this project, because it's a very short developmental project, and Ray and I were very much working on the play. So I think the fact that we can share this space together, this virtual space together, work creatively on improving a play with the support, the new group, and then also being able to have this conversation about climate change and climate activism. I just think it's a really great gift of the fact that we're in this crisis right now, that we can share these virtual spaces together and pull together a remarkable cast of actors, and Ray's up in Maine and I'm down in Virginia, and we're all here together in this virtual space. So thanks to everyone that made this happen, because it was we had a fun and very full 3 days of work together on this wonderful project.
What is the plan going forward, Ray, for this play?
Well, I just want to second what Kareem said. I'm so grateful for these incredible actors and for Kareem and Ian and the work that goes into making this possible through against impossible odds. So really thank you guys so much for that. And Anna and Cheryl, both of you, for being here for that. It means the world to me. This is a weird time for theater. It's a reinvention time. It's a back to basics time. It's a stand on your head and walk with your hands time. So something I'd like to do is see who else feels like this is relevant for right now. And also, it's a flexible piece. It doesn't have a lot of like big set pieces and stuff like that. So the plan right now is to kind of see where it fits into the theater during COVID paradigm and where it can and what it can do during and after that.
Beautiful. Okay, you guys. Well, I'm very sorry that we have to wrap it up now. This was very fun. It was lovely to meet you all. It was so delightful to receive your wonderful performances and your great writing, Ray. Thank you, Anna Jane, so much for taking the time to join us tonight in between shooting your movie. She's making a movie, which is great. While COVID, it's like a lockdown movie, I understand, which is awesome. So thank you all so much for your generosity and for your artwork. I love this. I have been working for some years and I just really love this spirit of inviting people in to meet the climate crisis and the climate issue through the open, joyful door of art. And that's what I experienced tonight with you all. So just a few end announcements before we go. For those of you at tuning in through YouTube, we invite you to tune into the other events in the Facing the Rising Tide Festival, including new play readings and talkback panels tomorrow and Friday evening at 7 Eastern, and our Climate Arts as Activism discussion panel tomorrow, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. For more information about these, please see thenewgroup.org/facing-the-rising-tide. And if you'd like to know more about how you can become part of solving the climate crisis, our team at NRDC has put together a number of resources and action items related to issues raised in this and the other plays. And a link to where you can find those resources. It should be in your YouTube comments, but if you don't see it there, you can go to thenewgroup.org/climate-action-resources. So thank you all so much. Thank you to our wonderful artists and to Anna Jane. Thank you to the New Group and to NRDC. And thanks to all of you at home for tuning in and participating in our discussion. Please be safe, take good care out there, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone.